Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Wow, I'm excited for today's episode. Before I introduce our guest, here's a quote just for this episode. Not only is it harder to be a man, it is also harder to become one. Ariana Huffington. Our guest today helps create men and women into better versions of themselves. For over 15 years, they've been a coach, focusing on knowledge, skill sets, but also attitudes and habits. Worked at Facebook with Thrive Global with our quote person right here, Ariana Huffington, is a dear friend of one of the freaking Culture Matters family members for this podcast, Tony Capullo. Apparently, they've known each other since, well, forever, basically, who we owe a debt of gratitude to setting this up. And is not only a survivor, but a thriver and a healer of people. And so thank you for coming on the show. Hannah K. Herdlinger, Thread Talk, and Cashbox. Oh,
Yes.
author too. Healthy Relationships, Thread Talk, Guide to Healthy Relationships. We'll talk about. There's a lot more. I could spend 20 minutes on the introduction. Thanks for coming on the Culture Matters podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay. It's great to be here.
Did you envision, yourself as a young child as a coach of all these business people? Because that's an interesting predicament or place to be in, don't you think?
It is, and it's sort of this beauty of where I am now. So I'm in a unique position and I love it where I am, where my father is the founder of Cashbox Coaching. And he was a coach before, this coach term has been thrown out for, all the time. So
Yeah.
even before that. So I am very fortunate to have had him in my life, and to see what coaching is all about. And my life, as you mentioned, with my career path has ebbed and flowed, but I've always had, my sights set on being a coach because I saw how awesome that it could be. And so weaving through, I've been a coach for over 12 years and 15 years in my life. So what is time anymore? And so with that, the now I'm at a place where I have actually officially joined Cashbox Coaching,
Wow.
which is with my father, and am officially one of his coaches. So as a little girl, this was sort of something that was kind of on my list, but now I'm officially in it and I love it. So I'm in that unique position here.
For those that aren't really aware of the term or they've heard it so much it has, little significance in their lives. What is a coach?
Yeah, no, well, and that is the thing too. Right now, like I mentioned, this word coach has been thrown around all over and people interpret it in different ways. A lot of people think, and which has been interpreted, is coaching is sort of telling you what to do, and I'm going to coach you, and I'm going to really bring you back into
Yeah.
where you need to be. But in reality, a true coach is someone that helps you live your life to your full potential. We all have the answers here in our head where we want to be and how we can live our full potential. So, a true coach helps guide the person to where they want to be, and does that in a series of asking questions and really helping others see their blind spots and getting down to how that person or company or organization can get to their full potential.
To the skeptic listening, thinking, oh, I know where I need to be.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why even bother?
And yeah, right. So a lot of we
Click.
all have blind spots. I mean, you can say you don't have blind, we all have blind spots. Now, is it going to be someone who will help surface these or even call them out for you? That's where people say, oh, I know everything, I can do everything. Okay, well, you may think that you know everything, but what about the people who are interacting with you? How are they taking it? Are they taking it as sort of, oh, this person has their ego, they're never going to listen to me, I don't want to work with them because they think they already know something. So it's really seeing that whole holistic view all the way around
Mm.
of people.
Have you found like what's the connection with the clients that are all fully bought in to the idea of having that guide versus the ones that aren't in their behavior?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing that once if somebody's closed off, I don't want to coach somebody who doesn't want to be coached, first of all, because if they're not open, um, it's not going to be good for any person, for me or for them. If they're going to be so closed off, it's sort of like you can't help someone unless they want to help themselves.
Mm.
Like, don't I don't want somebody to come to me and feel like I'm their punishment. I want to come alongside someone and help them. And you might be thinking, well, I don't know if I need a coach. I, I didn't know if I needed a coach. And
Mm.
I'll tell you, I have a coach of my own. I'm very fortunate to have my father, again, who's been a coach. He doesn't always coach me. He is my dad, but if I need him, he will. But it's sort of that once you understand and have that relationship and have that person who can pull these different things out of you, your life can completely change. And I'm a prime example of that as well.
Why did he start it?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question because you started it so long
He's an
ago.
OG. I mean, ultimately,
Yeah.
this has become a cool thing. That's why I'm curious about it. Become a
And
known thing, right? But this is a
yeah,
long time ago he started this.
it
Uh,
really is. And it's sort of the
Wow.
beauty of Cashbox coaching. And this is also something is when coaching started coming around, it really was this idea of getting people to find their full potential by asking questions, not consulting per se. And at the time, my dad was also working with some leadership development and that kind of thing. And that's the beauty of what we do at Cashbox Coaching. We actually merge this leadership and management development with the coaching, to get the full. We're going to, as you mentioned, and I really appreciate, I'm going to stress one more time that Cashbox Coaching, cash is spelled KASH. It stands for knowledge, attitudes, skills, and habits. And you have to have the knowledge and skills in order to do what you want to do. But the attitudes and habits are so important as well. So, what we do at Cashbox Coaching, again, going back to what you were saying, is we pull both sides together to reach that whole, help you fill your whole cash box, as we say.
What's the relationship between one's attitude and their knowledge?
Yeah. So, well, with the attitudes and habits and knowledge and skills, right? So, like, you
Mm.
have the knowledge, you do the things. If you start to realize that you're doing the same things over and over, that may not be getting you to point where whatever point you want to get to,
Yeah.
right? So you can have those knowledge, but if your attitude is, ugh, I don't want to do this, or, oh, Sally Sue over here is, she's just never going to help me get to where I need to be. You have the knowledge, you know where it needs to be, but your attitude could be hindering where you need to get to go. So by focusing on those attitudes and habits, it really helps you see, maybe you have this blind spot that you didn't have, that you didn't know that you had this. I'm using this as an example, communication blocker with
Mm.
Sally Sue, and so to really help understand that, can really bring it all together.
In the sense that someone could be negative when they think they're positive.
Yeah, well, that's one example, right?
Uh,
Exactly. So sometimes we get stuck in our head. We think that the way, like you said, the way we're doing it is the right way, the only way.
mm.
Well, if I think that my way is one way, and let's say I'm, again, totally pulling an
Mm.
example out, but I'm a person who just needs 3 bullet points. That's how I need to receive my information. But Sally is someone who needs 3 pages to understand and be able to understand where she is. Well, if I'm giving her 3 bullet points, she's not feeling like she's getting something. So I have the knowledge, but the way that I'm delivering it, or the way that we're not communicating to effectively make things happen. So by coming together and realizing where are those sticking points. And that was a very like pared down example, right? There are a million things that this could happen, but that's one of the things that I think really holds a lot of people up are communication styles and being stuck in our ways that well, I just think that everyone should have 3 bullet points, and
Yeah.
which that's not the case. We're not all the same.
Mm.
And so just being able to help people see and break down those kind of attitudes and habits that they're working with too.
Do you think that working in, because you served in the Senate, you were working with various senators.
Yes.
Did that experience, has that experience helped your experience in businesses? Do you think there's a connection?
Yeah, so for me, I absolutely do, because I and I actually talk about this all the time. When
Really?
I worked in the Senate, this was years ago, right? And even before me, I feel like this was way different than when I was in there, because when I was in the Senate, this is again an analogy, like we walked down the halls and everybody would talk to each other even though we don't agree on the same party, right? But you'd
Yeah.
still be, hey, talking to your friends. Now I feel like where we are, of course, I haven't worked in the Senate during this time, but where we are just in the world, we're so divided that it's hard to even come together on those. So I could feel a shift when I was working in the Senate. I can't imagine what it's like now. But talking to people who were there before me, they think that I was in a space that was like not, we were divided. Whereas where I was there
Wow.
compared to now, I didn't think we were as divided. So I think it is slowly coming to that,
It is, would an analogy be like sales and ops?
yeah,
If sales and ops aren't able to
to come together.
cooperate, even
Yeah.
if they inherently have differences of the world completely, then
Yes.
what happens to the organization? I'm curious what you think.
Yes. And that's the thing. All pieces of an organization, when you're looking at an organization as a whole as well, that's where people need to come together. And sometimes, like you said, you have like one department that's focused on one thing, that's their goal, that's their line of sight, where you have another department that they have their priorities and their goals. And so everybody's kind of trying to get to where they need to be, but if you're not talking to each other, it's just going to be completely siloed. And that's one thing that we do at Cashbox
Hmm.
Coaching is we like to coach the whole organization, like leadership, because we want to help those folks come together, not be siloed, and really figure out where those miscommunications are.
How important is it for the leaders to be on board with
Oh,
coaching?
is
If
oh,
yeah,
with sorry.
well,
Sorry,
no, yeah,
I
with the
got you off
coaching,
there.
like,
No,
or what were you, where were you going to take it?
yeah, well, no, I mean, just to be on the same page. You would be so
Oh
surprised
yeah,
at how many um, folks think they're on the same page because they're all working for the same company, but they're not, because they have other priorities and that kind of thing. This is sort of a random example, but I think everyone can relate to this, right? Is, let's say you're in a hospital and the food service sort of siloed out, right? So the food service, their goal is to make the food, to get the food, make sure the patients have the food. Um, Whatever time they get the food, they're fed, right? Well, then if you look at a schedule, so if they're behind schedule, they think, okay, well, I got the food to the patients, it's high quality food, it's delivered. But then if they're not following the schedule, the doctors, the nurses with the medications and that kind of thing, that's on a particular schedule. So when that food delivery is off by just a little bit, everything gets thrown off.
yeah.
So that's why it's so important to realize that these little pieces of the puzzle actually make a huge difference. And in one department, one person's mindset, they're getting the job done. They're doing it. You know, they got it there on the day that it was it was due, and that kind of thing. But in the other, it was, oh, I wasn't able to do X, Y, and Z because you were late. And so being able to understand those pieces, it matters. It really matters.
Does success undermine itself?
Does success undermine itself? Yeah, I mean, I think like in that now I'm sort of lost where I was gonna go, where I was gonna say with that, but I mean, I think it can.
What, yeah, what, in what ways have you seen it, or maybe not?
And I think I think my mind just went to a different place. So reel me back in just a little bit. I'm so
But well, I'm
sorry.
thinking, let's say we all, we're all moving in the same direction, and we
Yeah.
achieve the outcome we seek.
Yes. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
and then what, right?
Yeah, no, and I thank you, because I was still going to use another example. This is perfect though. So in that sense, I mean, I think we're all working to the same thing. If we continue to have those positive results, we're going to get more positive outcomes. So I think with success, the more that you see those positive results, the more that you're going to want to work together, the more that you're going to see where that takes you, and continue to go on. So one of those things is with using attitudes and habits with the behavior model, right? So you have attitudes, behaviors, results, and outcomes. If you have a positive behavior, it's going to influence if you have a positive attitude, it's going to influence the behavior that you demonstrate, which is going to influence those results and outcomes. Those results and outcomes, success, if they're positive and you're getting the success that you want, it's going to then make you have that positive attitude again. And it's a complete circle that goes around and around, this loop, this continuous loop.
Oh, what are some elements that uh, break that loop?
I mean, it could be, there's so many different things that, again, I know this is sort of cliche to say, but like that bad attitude, right? Like if you say, I'm really bad at this, I'm not going to be able to do this, even just changing that will change your behavior and your results and outcomes. And again, thank you for reeling me back in a little bit, but here's another just simple example that can show how this might work. So a lot of people say that they're not good at remembering names. If I ask that question to your audience, how many people are good at remembering names? I bet there's so many people who say, I'm not good at remembering names. I remember faces. I don't remember names. Well, then I'll tell you, that's why you're not good at remembering names, because you have that attitude, I'm not good at remembering names. But just by shifting that attitude, I am really good at remembering names, it's going to shift your behavior. So when you meet someone, you're going to make sure you get their name because you want to remember their name. And you're going to make sure you hear it correctly. So your attitude, I'm good at remembering names, changes your behavior. So now you really work to get that name, right? And then that will change your results and outcomes, because then you're going to realize you are good at remembering names. And when you see people, you're going to call them by their name instead of being like, oh, shoot, I don't remember names. And then you're going to get that favorable attention because people like to be recognized. So then that's just going to make you be like, I want to remember more people's names. So just that little attitude shift there on anything can really influence your behavior and your results, and you can see more success in that sense.
Would you say that it's creating an opening or a potential, whereas in the absence of that, there's no opening, there's no potential.
Oh, for sure. If you're being closed off, you're closing off all of those opportunities, all of that. Now, the key is sometimes it's hard for us to realize ourselves that that's what we're doing. And so by having a coach and having someone, we help you see those blind spots. We help you realize, like, hey, that's what you're doing. It may not be as simple as just saying, I have a bad attitude, but
Yeah.
it's really understanding, like, what is holding you back? What are those things that we can't see that's not getting you where you need to go? And to sort of pivot that a little bit also is, if you're working with a management company or even yourself, there may be things that are not in the current present. It may be something that has happened in your past. It may be something that you grew up like always knowing this, or someone always criticizing you on something in particular, that you don't realize that that's even the way you're speaking to yourself, because it's just this way that you've always known, or you you know you think it's
Hmm.
right.
You've used a lot of examples to instantiate your points. Is that something that you've learned because of being an advisor, or?
It is. I feel that I have learned that more people learn through examples and through telling actual stories and instances. And so I I do. I have lots of examples and stories because I feel like that's what people can relate to as
Mm,
well. Instead of just throwing a whole bunch of things, because
yeah.
um, you know, we can't all relate to certain things, but when you hear a story, when you hear an example, you sort of put yourself in that.
What are some of the challenges businesses are facing now in the current state of the market that you guys are seeing and contemplating around?
Yeah, and I know, we're everyone's tired of hearing the COVID thing, right?
Sure.
But when you come out of that, it really did affect people's lives. I'm not talking about your business operations, all of that. We can all see that. But take it a step further. People, not able to leave their homes, do all of that. We got used to a certain way of living. We got used to some of that. You'll hear a lot of different people talk about, like, oh, well, now my office is making me come back to the office. I was
Yeah.
perfectly fine when I was this. There's a whole lot of that, right? And that takes
You're seeing
time,
that.
and right, yes, with a whole lot of different things. A lot of other things that people don't um you know necessarily think about, and with that are, those I just had a child in this past year, so I didn't have a child during COVID, but those people who also had children at home, like, that was one thing that they had to get their, homeschool their children, do that. Those kids didn't just go back to school the next day and were like perfectly fine, right? So parents are having to work with their kids still to get them acclimated. Yes, we're years out, but this is still something that's coming on, that builds up, and to be able to see that. So I think just really understanding where the person is. Everybody's different. Not everybody has children. Not everybody was experiencing, maybe they were experiencing violence at home or something like that. Like, everybody has a different story, but we all have that story. So being able to understand where the person is. Um, One other, again, example that I'll give is, let's say you have a business and you have pinpointed somebody that you think is the rock star, like they will be your next right hand. You want them to come alongside you, and talk to that person, and yes, they have the knowledge and skills and everything, but then they get in that position and they're not the rock star that you thought that they were. Well, let's peel the onions back. Let's figure out what's going on. What are their attitudes, their habits? Maybe being promoted is not where they actually wanted to be, because being promoted took them away from being home with their children more, going and learning a new skill, doing something else that they wanted to do. And so being able to understand that just because the person has the knowledge and skills doesn't necessarily mean that that's where they want to be at that time in their life, right? So
Yeah.
being able to understand the whole person and what's going on all around makes a huge difference.
How do we go about developing that awareness and
Yeah,
seeing the whole picture? What would you recommend?
communication. It boils down to communication. Having conversations with people, not just going to people and saying, this is what I think you need to do.
Yeah.
Though, yes, that's how we get things done sometimes, right? But when people don't understand why they're doing something, how they're doing something, if they're just told go do this, it doesn't always work out the best. And so just, spending a few minutes, one of the things we say is, like a hospital, you round on your patients, round on your employees, take time to actually just talk to them and get to know them a little bit, because you will be so surprised at how much you find out just by checking in.
Whose responsibility is it? The employer or the employee? What do you think?
Well,
Is it an either or?
I think it's either or, because I think it all depends on the situation. One example that again, I keep saying that, but that I will use in my
Retention.
personal life. You mentioned that, I've worked with all of these people. One of the people that I worked with was Sheryl Sandberg, who was a COO of Facebook. And she was, at the time I worked for her. I was the employee, she was my boss, and I, behind closed doors, was experiencing domestic violence, and no one knew this. It was a secret that I had kept, but it got so bad that I wasn't able to do what I needed to do. I probably could have put on a front or whatever, but I took it upon myself to let her know. She was one of the first people I let
Mhm.
know. I said, I asked for some time off of work so I could file for divorce and go through this. And she would have had no idea. There was nothing that I flashed. I hid it from everyone. And so it was my responsibility to go to her and let her know, like, this is what's going on. I think also, if she would have just checked in, maybe I wasn't ready to say that. But having that openness to know that it's a safe place, right? So it's sort of on both. It's on the employer to make themselves available and feel safe, but it's also on the employee to speak up when something like that is and I'm not saying, please don't hear me, I'm not saying you have to air all your dirty
Sure.
laundry, but if you feel you're at a place that you need extra support, um, that it could spiral downwards, I do think that it's also both ways, because if you're not being honest and you don't feel safe, then there's that back and forth.
Even if unspoken, what would be some values that represented her leadership style or temperament?
her
Cheryl.
her yeah, well, and that was the thing too, like with Cheryl, and that's where I learned things. She does check on people, and she
Oh,
does make it a safe place to to be able to speak. I mean, a lot of people can look again on the outside and say, well, she's running this massive company, she's doing all of these things, she has this nonprofit, like, how in the world can she make herself available? Like, oh, you're just pretending, like, no, she truly is that person. And the other thing for me, when I asked for the time off, at the time I was living on the East Coast, Facebook's headquartered on the West Coast. So not only did she give me that time off, she took it a step further and offered me a chance to restart my life on the West Coast. So being able to connect, being able to check in and go above and beyond, those little things really, really, truly matter. No one is too busy. No one is too busy to connect and check in.
What do you think it says to the culture when the employees feel that the leadership is too busy?
I think that there's definitely, I think it goes both ways too. I think that there some leadership close themselves off because they feel like they have to pretend like everything is perfect, everything is on. When you're more vulnerable, it's no one is perfect. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
no one is perfect. And when you pretend to be perfect, or you want to hold information or not share information because you don't think it's important, it's gonna just downward spiral. And how do you know if information is important or not? Ask your employees, like, it may be so trivial to you, you may not think it matters, but once you really just ask, connect, figure that out, maybe the smallest piece of information could mean the world to an employee who feels like they're, just doing the job and there's no reason behind it or something.
Does Cashbox work with a lot of private businesses, public companies?
Oh,
What have you learned from either or from both? Yeah, curious.
yeah, well, it's obviously a lot. We work with big companies and small companies, right?
Wow.
And it's a total difference. I mean, even for me working, at Facebook with a gajillion
Yeah.
people, thousands. And I've also worked with nonprofits that when I started, there were less than 10. There's obviously going to be a different way to connect with that, right? But it's also about the organizational structure, right? Like, not every single person in a huge, large company has to directly talk to the CEO, the COO, that kind of thing, but to feel supported in every piece of that organization. And that works both ways too, right? The sort of mid managers and that can go both ways. They can report up, they can report down. So it really lies in the whole organization.
What do you think about I'm only able to say no. I can't say yes and no.
It all depends on the situation. You may not be able to say share information or something. Be honest about that, right? Like, I have to
Mhm.
say no because there's information I'm not able to share. Don't just say no, period. Right? Like, if you just say no without a reason, but if you say no because there are things that I'm not able to share right now, at least that gives me an idea that there's a reason you're saying no. I don't have to be privy to why you said no. But be honest, like, when you have to say no, um on something like that, just
Mm.
communicate that down. Don't share all your secrets. There's so many pieces of information that not every single person in a company needs to know, right? But if you just say that, be honest, like,
What are
this is information.
some ways to really ruin a team meeting?
To ruin a team meeting, it would be to, now, with time, we all know that time is valuable, right? So going in, it all depends. If you go in and you just dominate the meeting, that's fine. But if there's no avenue at all, right? Like afterwards, to listen to other people, to understand, to to bring the other people together. If it's just, this is how it is, I'm not listening to anyone, boom, you know, um, that's a way to ruin everything,
Why?
because people feel like they're not a part of it, right? Like, not everyone has to be a part of every decision, but everyone wants to feel, they want to feel recognized. They want to be somebody. They want
Hmm.
to know that what they're doing matters, right? So it doesn't matter what level you're on, everybody wants to be somebody. And so when you completely clop that down, that just ruins it for
Hmm.
everyone.
Can you see, is there too much? Is there a thing, like too much meeting?
Yeah, that's, yes, the saying that, oh, it could have been an email,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Instead,
That is
um
fun.
I think, again, it
What's the
goes,
scoop, you know?
yeah, it all is based on what's going on, how how is each company, like, are people, do we know we're going to have meetings all the time, because that some companies are like that. We have meetings because we have meetings, right? And if you know you're going to have a meeting, that's just the way it is. So that's tricky, because there are actually people who thrive in that meeting space, and so
Yeah.
they want more meetings. They want more, even with people now, so many people are working remotely, and so a meeting may not be all in one conference room. It could be on a Zoom, right? And some people thrive more that way, even when they're working remotely, to just have that meeting, if I sort of use that in quotes, because it's that personal touch, and that meeting is that time that they can come and feel attached, so connected. So I think that, yes, there could be too many meetings, but on the flip side, sometimes maybe there aren't enough.
Mm. How about work ethic for a time, an age, we're in an age where the cost of money is increasing. Uh, right? If so things may slow down before they speed up on a
Mhm.
macro level. So, what type of work ethic are you seeing thrive right now? What isn't thriving? I'm curious if you can unpack some of that, because if I understand this correctly, Tony spoke very highly of Cashbox's ability to grow over the long term with clients, have a high retention of clients. That makes me think you guys are seeing things that we need to tap into on the show. So yeah, work ethic.
And that's gonna, again, vary industry to industry, right? So, like, if
Yeah,
you're at a
absolutely.
hospital or something, like, you you can't just say, like, oh, we're gonna cut this down to, like, there has to
I hope
be,
not.
you have to be on during your time, right? Like, that's just sort of how this works. But we will see a lot more now of this, allowing the flexibility to work during the hours that work well for you. Again, this isn't going to
Huh.
work for everyone, right? But we find that it is, sometimes people work better when they're just zoned in, turned down, doing this, and they are able to produce way more work in this, like, short amount of time. Others like to pull it out a little bit more. So I think being able to have this flexibility for each person to show up when they can show up and do the best time is when they're going to thrive, because they're there. Again, not every company, industry, all of this can allow for that flexibility, because you have to show up at this time. But when you are feeling your best, when you feel like you have the support of other people to be able to, again, deal with the things that you're dealing with in your personal life, it allows you to really, like, come strong, come to work, ready to work, and work hard in
Hmm.
that sense.
What reactions are you seeing of companies with their people that don't want to go back to the office? How are they navigating
There's
that
Yeah,
successfully?
and you know, I think there are different things that you can do as well, right? With folks that have to come into the office, that with companies that there's not a remote option, right? Like or something like that. Make your office environment a um this is funny because I actually just total side note, but I just can't remember the company, but just read an article about a company that created their office space to be Instagrammable, to make people
Wow.
feel like, you know, like they're coming to this Instagram thing. That was total side
Wow,
note, but
that's
I just
wild.
read that. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying every office needs to make their office Instagrammable, but there are ways to make it where people come and they feel supported, and they don't feel like, you know, oh, I have to come back into the office again. Just, you know,
It's in,
and
so do you think that the general person, all of us, we have more leverage against the tyrannical boss that may or may not realize they're tyrannical? Meaning,
yeah,
I don't want to go to a church where I go, and every time I go, I'm just like totally, I feel terrible. when I'm just, that's an example. There you go. I'm using one. Like,
yeah,
meaning I have to want to be there.
yes,
And so the onus is growing on the organizations to create an environment conducive to people
yeah,
wanting to participate, right? It's like a paradox. I don't want to be in the office if I don't like the people I work for. So how are they going to get me to be in the office? Well, they have
and
to be
that's
likable.
yeah, they have to be likable. And also, that's one of the things that we do at Cashbox Coaching too. When we're coaching with folks, sometimes we realize, and you know, for better for worse, it's definitely for the better, where whether it feels like that at the time or not, we're able to uncover that maybe there's nothing that can change, that this person just is not, doesn't want to be there. They're not going to embrace the change, to want to be a part of this. um there's just nothing anyone can do, right? And sometimes that's the case, but to be able to uncover that and to say, maybe this isn't a good fit, maybe you should go pursue that underwater basket weaving that you wanted, and not be in this organization. But yeah, I think that we are in a world right now that you are able to have a voice. And if you don't want to be there, yes, you need to be there, but like, let's uncover why you don't want to be there, or let's uncover what you need in order to want to go to the office, in order to be there.
Does Cashbox work with the ownership of organizations?
So we actually do all kinds. We do, so we have corporate coaching where we're working with the um leadership management. That we also do individual coaching. So we find when we're working with organizations that it is that what we call that corporate coaching, where we're working across all of the departments, across all of everything, so no one's siloed. But also that individual coaching. Sometimes we have, you know, individuals who just say, I'm stuck, I need help, help me, help me here. To be able to uncover the individual as well as the organization.
Um, yeah, what do you think of social media's impact, integration, influence over companies today?
Social media. I love social media, but as I'm also a prime example of people can hide behind social media, right? Like I mentioned that previously, when I was working with, what I was dealing with behind closed doors on social media, everyone can make everything look
Yeah.
perfect, and all of this. I think social media is great because we're able to learn more, find out more, have easier access to things. But on the flip side, it's not always the full story, and or people um and companies can hide behind things on social media. So
Absolutely.
it plays so many roles, but it's a part of our life. I mean, social media is here. There are pros and there are cons, but I definitely think that it does influence other people.
I'm curious, just to throw something out there. I think that there's an interesting phenomenon occurring where even the ownership of institutions um, are disengaging from their own equities as a result of the impact subconsciously these platforms play on humans. Like, one of the paradoxes of founding a business is I don't want to work for anyone. I want to do what I want to do. But then the paradox in that is, well, if I don't work for my customers and for my employees and for my shareholders, I'm going to essentially fail miserably and or create, living hell, right? I'm being a little dramatic, but a
Yeah.
purgatory for myself. So I'm curious what you think. This is like something working thesis I've been working on. That social platforms, even for, because we're all consuming, right, this alternate reality, even the ownerships, they're become. And if I have like a really big company, maybe I'm at a certain level, I'm distracted. Now everybody wants to know what I think because I have this business. So I've watched this happen where all right, I want your thoughts. It's not just customers anymore that the company has. They also have fans. And now this is something new. It's not just, company, ownership, employees, customer. Well, I'll say it this way: ownership, customer, and then ownership, employee, customer, and then ownership, employee, customer, company. Like, it evolves, right? And then it's ownership, customer, employee, company, fans, social media presence, fans of the company, fans of the. So I mean, I don't know. I think it's creating disengagement from the top.
Well, and again, when I say, everybody puts their best foot forward, social media, let me say this, social media does not always, now it can in some states, but go back to, revenue, success of the company and that kind of thing. Just like you said, like you could have people posting and becoming fans because different people are doing different things, engaging or talking about something, but then in reality, they're just talking. Now, of course, talking gets your name out, gets that, it all helps. Like you said, it's all of this. But just because company X has a gajillion likes or something like that doesn't mean that those, like you said, are all their customers. Not every single person who likes, who engages, is purchasing that product, that service, engaging in that. Now, the more people know about it, of course, that's just sort of the way we work, right? Like, oh, my friend had that. I want to know more. It's going to get it
Absolutely.
talking. But when you see those numbers, and that's one of the things that people equate now, like, oh, those metrics, like, oh, you have this many connections, oh, you have this many likes, oh, that means that, you know that's the number, like that's when in reality, like sometimes those who only have a what seems like in our minds few likes, few engagements, few of that, those are the customers who are loyal, who are buying the product, who are doing it, making more sales, having these face-to-face interactions that aren't on social media, that are getting the sales. So you're exactly right. Social media has caused this totally different
I think I want your
avenue
thoughts
for
on this. I
us.
think that if it's not used properly, it can actually lead the ownership to get so much buy-in from the fans that they may not develop the emotional intelligence to actually connect with their
Yes,
people, which is why they need coaches like
yes,
Cashbox to help them. They may not be connecting with their people
yes,
because they've got these other people they're connecting with. It's
yes,
something I've observed over the last 6 years
Yeah.
being in the field.
It's a true thing. Yes.
And it's like we want to align all of these things, not have them separate.
Right.
Because obviously the ownership of the organization has to market and brand the organization.
Of course.
We don't want
Of
to stop
course.
doing that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm curious to your thoughts though.
Yeah, and it's where are people actually connecting with their customers, with their consumers? Because yes, it is. I mean, there are studies that are shown that like the more likes, the more engagement. It makes you feel good, right? Like that's what we want. But again, social media doesn't always equate back to sales and to really getting the company going and the revenue that they need. And so you're right, when you're focusing on just getting the number, the likes or something like that, you have to include those people and really understand who your true customer, your true target audience, and make sure that they are included in that. Because otherwise it's just not it's just not gonna work. But there is a way to merge all of it, right? Like make sure you're taking care of your people, and like all of this other stuff that's happening out there is just extra
Mm,
fun. But if
you know,
you're not connecting with your employees, your clients, your customers, all of this other fluff and likes isn't going to matter.
in closing, the skeptic of the beginning, now they're more open than they were in the beginning of the conversation because as they scroll social platforms, they see everybody's a coach.
Right. Yes.
And so they're in the beginning of this conversation, not interested, but they stuck around. What's your call to action to them for why to give coaching an opportunity
How are
coaching?
we different?
Yeah, like why entertain the idea of bringing in a mentor, bringing in a coach, and why specifically Cashbox in closing?
Yeah. So why bring in a coach? I mean, everyone needs that coach. Everyone, again, wants to be somebody, wants to be recognized. We all want to reach our full potential. What's holding us back? And when you have somebody more like a consultant who's telling you this and that, that may not be what you truly want. A true coach helps someone, you know, find their inner self and get to where they want to be. It's this mutually beneficial um, arrangement that gets them there. And so for Cashbox, that's what we do. We want to help you get to from point A to your point B and even further. And we're going to do that by searching into you and not telling you, but helping you surface the answers to get you where you need to go.